Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Don't forget to subscribe to Check Call, the newsletter on FreightWaves.com if you haven't already. Today we welcome Tim Fair, COO of Happy Returns. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Thank you, Mary. Excited to be here.
I am excited about today. This is the returns and reverse logistics is something a little near and dear to my heart. It's kind of how I got thrown into the world of logistics of, hey, welcome to this company. It's your first day. You don't really know anything about what we do here. If you could build a return system, that'd be great. So that's why returns is always a little near and dear to my heart, because it's how I started. But before we get too far into kind of the nitty gritty of that, let's get some background on you and how you got started at Happy Returns.
It sounds great. So I started in Happy Returns in 2018, so kind of a while ago now. Before that, I was working at a company called McMaster Car, which is a business-to-business distributor of industrial supplies. It's a very great kind of place to learn operations. We've actually hired a bunch of people from McMaster to work for us, but it's sort of slow growth, pretty mature company, and I was looking for a startup at the intersection of technology and logistics. And back in the pre-pan days, you had to find an employer in the place you lived. So Happy Returns, I kind of applied on a whim. I'd never heard of the company before. It seemed like an intriguing idea. And yeah, it's been great. It's kind of like the startup dream that you want as a job seeker. I was the 14th employee of Happy Returns. When we started, we had a warehouse and office combined that was 3,000 square feet, 9 blocks from the beach in Santa Monica. We had 4 warehouse employees, and we did in my first month what we do now in 30 minutes. So it's we've really seen a lot of stuff happen. I mean, we're now like a UPS shipping product. Like, it's sort of as mature as you can get, as validated as you can get, and we're very proud of the work we did to get here.
I think that has to be kind of the coolest thing, excuse me, especially to look back on and go, wow, we were like, we were struggling, we were grinding, we were really, in it to win it. And then that's how much we did in a month. And now you guys do it in like the blink of an eye. That has to be
Yeah, I mean,
cool
look,
thing.
there were times when I was taking the trash out myself for a while in the hubs. We were lean, in the kind of pandemic VC days. And yeah, I know it's cool to build a real thing. And I think we're just sort of historically we've been kind of a disruptor in the space, right? Like, everyone was designed to move single piece packages. We combine packages. If you look at that narrowly, the parcel carriers weren't always enthusiastic about that approach. So we were really thrilled when the UPS acquisition happened. We felt like it was sort of an ultimate validator of our approach, and we're very happy to be here at UPS now.
I'm also very happy you guys are there as a someone who has used Happy Returns. It actually is quite nice.
Glad to hear that. Yeah.
It's been a wonderful process. But that's just speaking from me. But you guys essentially, kind of what Happy Returns does is you guys have that box-free return. So you could basically take whatever you get, take it back to the UPS store or wherever your drop-off location is, and get that return with a partner. What kind of like made you guys say, okay, box free at a UPS store or just a specific partner? What made you guys say this is the way that we want to do it? And like, kind of how did you guys see that like this is what consumers actually wanted to do, was not have to find their own boxes?
We have a very interesting origin story. So our 2 founders, David Sobey and Mark Geller, they were working for Hotlook. If you remember Hotlook from, kind of the flash sale days. Hotlook got purchased by Nordstrom 12 years ago, maybe, 10, 11 years ago, and maybe more. And they created a program where you could buy on Hotlook.com and return to Nordstrom Rack. And they kind of they didn't really know how well it was going to work. And it immediately was an enormous success, like off the charts adoption immediately. And they were like, well, maybe, because the idea of taking a return to a store that you didn't buy it from, was very weird at the time, and some people still think it's kind of odd now, you know? And so they just saw the power of that, and, with e-com rising and a lot of digitally native brands, they was like, "Well, maybe we should apply this to kind of, third party," not through Nordstrom Rack, but as a, kind of independent startup, and so that was their idea, and they founded it based on that. So, we've been doing in-person returns sort of before it was cool. Um, we started in 2015, 2016. Amazon started doing, in-person, consolidated returns at Whole Foods and Kohl's, which, was really useful in kind of educating the market about it. And then, we've been building our business, ever since then. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned, your positive experience. It's not just you, who enjoys it. We have a lifetime net promoter score of 93, which, if you're familiar with NPS, is quite high for any business, and particularly high for like a logistics service. People tend to not be super enthusiastic about the shipping process, and so we bring, I think, genuine surprise and delight, to it. And I just, when I was interviewing at companies, I saw that and just assumed it was a lie from some tiny startup. And it's certainly true. Like, I manage the NPS program. It's very true. And yeah, it's just really fun to work at a company where your customers are overwhelmingly enthusiastic about your service. I mean, like me and the rest of the Happy Returns team, we walk around in the world, we talk to people, and I had people at the National Retail Federation conference come up to me and thank me for what we were doing. Yeah, it's just cool. It's cool to genuinely be adding value for the marketplace and also making consumers excited. I think this is kind of the story of progress in commerce. So we're thrilled to be at the forefront.
Yeah, I think, it's okay, not to brag, but it's so freaking easy. Like, you literally to the point where I was like, "Is this a scam?" Because all I do is just walk into a UPS store and go, "Here's a box and a barcode, thank you." And they were like, "Okay, great." And I was just like, "Wow, that's wonderful." Also, I don't think I know of any company specifically, like, at all, but also specifically in the logistics space that has an NPS score that aggressively high.
Yeah, no, I can't speak exhaustively, like benchmarking wise, but if when you look at other leaders in kind of retail or e-com, the low 70s is kind of like the high watermark. So it's very high. We're very proud of that, and I would say, there's been a lot of effort, and work from a lot of people for a decade to make that experience, very easy. And I think, ultimately, sort of a mark of our quality of work is, it's easy for you and is useful for the retailer, right? I think a lot of times, we think about consumer convenience and merchant value being rivals in the return space. And I think when you apply technology and operations well, you can just, great ideas solve problems without downside, right? And so I think that's really what we're trying to innovate here is how can we make this radically simple and very enjoyable, honestly, for consumers while still solving major problems for merchants. We believe that our product is at the intersection of those two things, and that's why we're overwhelmingly enthusiastic to be working here.
Yeah, I think that's a really great kind of place to Amelia.
So your dog agrees with me as well,
Yeah,
which is
she's
cool.
a
Thank you for
wholehearted
chiming in.
fan of Happy
Yeah.
Returns.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that you guys sit at a very interesting kind of or perfectly balanced spot of, kind of knowing what consumers want and then also helping merchants obviously not lose a obscene amount of money on returns. When it comes to returns, how have you guys seen kind of has there been changes in like customer and consumer expectations? And then also because there's been some talk recently that some merchants and some shippers are looking at maybe changing how they do returns because it's costing them so much money off their bottom line. So, as have you guys seen any of that kind of reflected in this space as well as kind of what consumers' expectations are for returns?
Yeah, so I think, there's been a lot of movement on the consumer and merchant side in the last 10 years. So just sort of charting this out, Um, I kind of think about it like I'm old enough to remember when Amazon's 2-day Prime program was like a big deal. And the kind of market had to keep up with that. So I think, if you look at kind of the late 2010s, e-com starts really growing, and it's starting to growing as like all these digitally native D2C companies get started. There's a lot of buzz. There's a lot of venture capital money that's at play, and the market is growing a lot. And so you see people having a very like a focus on customer acquisition and growth, as opposed to say cost management, particularly from the digitally native brands. And I think a lot of consumers' expectations were shaped during that period. It was sort of a formative period in e-commerce. And then you have the pandemic happen, and you have a kind of a maybe like a 12 to 18-month period where basically it takes those existing trends and puts them on, steroids, right? So the retail is dead. You'll never leave your house. Order everything online. Crushing volumes. So like you can kind of you can raise prices, but also it was a time to get customers, so everyone's focused on convenience. Then, kind of the party moderates a bit, interest rates rise, consumer spending is challenged by inflation. And, in a lower interest rate environment, venture capital firms are less interested in kind of these businesses. And so you see, understandably more emphasis on cost and margin management, but the consumer expectation is sort of already there. And then you have kind of at the same time as these macroeconomic trends are shifting, you have Gen Z entering the consumer space as like a genuinely meaningful share of wallet. And so all these kids you heard about in high school are now buying stuff online. And Gen Z has like a genuinely different perspective here. I kind of analogize this by saying like, so you and I'm not sure how old you are, but just guessing like, we didn't have like in like TikTok and Reels on our phone, and we maybe didn't have a cell phone till we were like 15 or 16 years old.
Got it when you learned to drive, and
Yeah,
definitely didn't text on it all the time because you got paid per message.
yeah, and so I think when you think about what is your relationship to your phone, it's influenced by sort of what technology was and expectations were when you were a kid and then when you were an adult. I think for Gen Z, they really grew up with a digitally native experience, not just in e-commerce, but for the world. And so their view, like I think for let's say a 40-year-old who's shopping online, buying a bunch of stuff and thinking you're gonna return almost all of it does feel different than if a 25-year-old is doing that. And so I think just Gen Z is like, "Dude, if it's not easy, like, I don't wanna talk to you." Um, and so then retailers are like, "Oh, crap, like, we have this is a challenging problem set." And then at the same time, you have fraud actually becoming a much bigger thing. And you have much more sophisticated actors, some of whom, I mean, we've seen dark web fraud as a service foreign actors trying to defraud retailers, right? So it's like, oh god, this is a lot. But I mean, the hope is there, right? There are many solutions to solve this problem. I think particularly pre-pandemic when we looked at legacy, sort of mature companies, and this suits like omni-channel folks who had a retail presence and online presence. When we talked to them about making returns easier, they were like, "What is wrong with you?" Uh, like, why would this makes no sense? That would be like talking to us about how we should have more fraud or something or more loss. It does not compute. So I think that view has changed. I think retailers are realizing, hey, look, free and easy returns for many consumers are table stakes. And I think Gen Z really feels like what they're not just buying the merchandise, they're buying that like, returns and overall e-com experience. And they think it's kind of a part of the price, you know? And so, yeah, I think there's a much bigger focus on returns than there's ever been, I think, for this reason. I gave a talk at NRF, last year, and like 5 years ago, NRF was not thinking about returns as a topic. And so, yeah, there's a lot more focus on it.
I think that it's It's especially become such a huge discussion because, as you know, more logistics service providers and others like that move into that return space. You kind of have to have a solution for it for your shippers because otherwise they'll just kind of otherwise you can like there's so much potential to lose so much money that like you've already kind of gotten the revenue from this thing. So why would you want to spend all this money to bring it back into your ecosystem into whatever condition it is? Because there are some, there was one shipper that I worked with that they would take anything back. It didn't matter how long ago you bought it. They would take it back. They would throw it in a box in the back of the stock room, and then they would have someone come pick up that super big box once it got full, and then it would go off somewhere. I have no idea what they did. All I know is that I had to go be like, but I promise this box full of random materials is going to be fine and you can totally pick it up with a forklift. Don't ask questions about it. It's going to be okay. Um, like there's people who still do that, but then also you have all these e-commerce shippers that are, outsourcing their fulfillment and their distribution and other stuff like that, that then they have to figure out, okay, well, I sent it all out. How do I get it back? And whether that's, picking up from different collection sites or whatever, it's a real problem that I think, in my personal opinion, is that shippers now have to pay attention to the logistics of returns to not lose twice as much money.
Yeah, no, I think you raise a good point. I actually don't think it's just about returns. And when you think about what core competencies do you need as a retailer or an e-com retailer, historically, merchandising and marketing have kind of been the two things, right? There's a lot of companies who sort of only know that, and then we're paying outside providers to do everything else. I just think the game is getting kind of fierce. And when you look at the expectations that are being set by the really big consolidated industry players, Walmart, Target, Amazon, I think that um, your competitive moat around only kind of brand merchandising marketing is just getting less because people are like with e-com, it's a lot. So much of it is about the delivery and the returns experience. And so I think you see a lot of retailers trying to expand their core competencies into these things. And I think it's actually sort of like a golden era of solutions for these problems. And I think many of them are more deeply embedded into the supply chains than may have been the case historically. I don't think we're at the period now where you can have some really cool ideas about, say, a straightforward fashion product, get a foreign manufacturer to make it, and then just throw it in a 3PL and kind of just wait for it to go work. Like, I think it's just it's getting more challenging to operate and meet people's expectations, and so the market is moving.
100% because it's so much money and effort is gone into collecting those customers that it's all about how do I keep them, how do I retain them, and how do I get them to buy again.
Correct, and I think for a lot of times there are some brands which have like a singular appeal, and so for them it may be easier. But we have a very healthy free market in this country, and so there's a lot of people competing for the same kind of share of wallet on the same things. And so, you can only differentiate yourself much through your merchandising choices. And if you have a really poor delivery and returns experience, people may kind of write you off. And that's really a bummer for the world class merchandisers of the world, right? So it's not like it's hopeless. We just we all need to get better. I think if there's a story in my mind about kind of like the second half of the 2020s and e-com and retail, it's like we all just need to get much better at kind of operations and logistics, and I think we will.
Yeah, I mean, it's poised already quite well to make those improvements, because otherwise your consumers will just not be interested, and then it won't be a problem for you anymore.
Well, how I think about it, right? So there's a handful of these like mega sort of closed walled garden players out there, and they have scale and resources and capacities, right? That say independent retailer X doesn't have. But I think it'd be a real shame, just like for for the welfare of Americans. If it was like, hey, there's 3 places to buy stuff online, like that would suck. It would suck for a bunch of reasons. And so, I think we're very eager to like be a force that is helping sustain kind of independent business in the e-com space.
1,000%. And, I would also like there to be more than 3 options to choose from. So something that you touched on earlier, is kind of fraud and returns. And this is something that like I see, obviously I'm not in day-to-day e-commerce returns like you are. But I see it, socially on different posts on social media or through the grapevine. Do you see this becoming a bigger problem, or is it kind of almost at a head of fraud return?
No, no, I don't think we've reached peak fraud by any means. And so, yeah, here's how I explain this. So I think about there being a spectrum of behaviors that retailers don't like. And on one end, you have, um, I'm going to buy 2 pairs of shoes because I know only one will fit. Some people, that maybe people are fine with that, but then there's the, I'm like 5 dresses and no, I keep one. Then you've got, I'm going to wear this dress to this bachelorette party and then return it. So these are kind of like policy questions. Uh, and then you've got, hey, I'm a dark web organized crime syndicate trying to engage in criminality for a monetary benefit, right? So these are different kinds of issues, and they are dealt with in different ways. So I think where we really add a lot of value is in that overt fraud area. So I mean, what is fraud in consumer returns? On a high level, it is claiming you returned something that you did not in fact return. And there's a bunch of ways that you can do that. And I would presume that people, it's an arms race. So as we on the side of, kind of righteousness figure out ways to make it harder, bad actors and kind of go up like that. But what we're excited about bringing value to the market with our solution, as I mentioned, it's about saying you return something you didn't return. Well, with Happy Returns, you have to go physically in person to a real place, and you have to have a person, scan the SKU on your shirt that you're returning to get a refund. So, is it possible to defraud that process? Yes, there are very few processes which are undefraudable. It is significantly more challenging than when you're using a more traditional solution. And as my junior high cross country coach told me, you just don't be the slowest gazelle on the savannah, right? You don't need to be the fastest, but as long as you're not the slowest, you won't get eaten. And I think when frauds, because fraudsters like evaluate your return system and make choices about where they think there are holes. And so it's just far harder to defraud in our approach. And so we think that adds value to merchants.
I really like that approach, because you don't have to have a flawless solution. You just don't have to have the worst. And if you
Yeah, and look, to be clear, I think our solution is the best.
Yes.
But I guess my point is, it's very hard to design a system which is genuinely impenetrable from a fraud perspective. Like even like the national security apparatus of the United States struggles with this. But it is orders of magnitude more secure than many other approaches you can take.
I do like that because it's all about just mitigating your exposure, right? That's most of what combating fraud is.
And fraud is often a trade-off game, right? So look, if you didn't accept returns, there'd be no returns fraud. That's not really commercially tenable. If you have some kind of business rules that drive credit decisions, well, you might catch some customers who you don't intend to catch, right? So usually it's like merchants view as a trade-off between kind of promoting consumer convenience and growth and protecting costs. Where we're excited about our solution is, you mentioned your genuine enthusiasm for the program, right? So something customers legitimately want to do that also makes fraud harder. Like I'm thrilled to have helped design that solution, right? We think it's very useful.
I also think it's very useful, and I would love everyone to have to do it because it's just easy.
Well, let's leave it there, Mary. Just
All right, there is
Every single retailer by the command of FreightWaves is now on Happy Returns. Love it.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it shall
Yeah.
be. Um, that being said, Tim, there is a question that everybody comes on the show. Well, it's our new question because when we hit 150, we decided to start a fresh start, clean slate. Um, and so that is the hardest question of the day is if you could build a house out of food, what would you choose?
Yes. So I think I would choose falafel kebabs
Okay.
because I think falafel would be insulative and actually somewhat water resistant. The skewers would provide some structural stability. And falafel is both delicious and nutritious.
Would you introduce a hummus baba ganoush mortar in between them for
Oh, yeah, I
maximum?
didn't know what the options were,
It's your house. You
but
can do whatever you want.
yeah, no, I think Mediterranean food is very amenable to spreads and dips. So I think, yeah, some kind of hummus, probably tzatziki would be a little too dairy forward for structure, but I think a
You
hummus,
can make it. You
you
can
know?
make one room. Like
Okay,
you can put like a
yeah,
dairy
like
in
an
a
interior,
basement
like
so
a
it doesn't get the
refrigerated
sun.
room.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, with, maybe a basement.
there you go.
So,
I like that.
yeah.
Also, I think that house would just smell amazing 24/7. But that's
It
just
would.
me. So that being said, Tim, from your falafel house, if anyone's got top tier falafel recommendations, or if they have any questions about maybe how to get involved with Happy Returns, where can they find you outside the show?
Yeah, so, LinkedIn, would be great. So just, Tim Fair at Happy Returns on LinkedIn and, shoot me a message. Be happy to talk.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Cool. Thank you so much.
You can find Check Out the Podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, like Apple Podcast and Spotify. Don't forget to check out all the other incredible FreightWave shows. And don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/checkcall. Heads up, we have a new FreightWaves group for you to check out. The Playbook, your roadmap to success in trucking. Built by Adam Wingfield, a 22-year trucking industry veteran, it's the comprehensive resource you've been waiting for. It's a one-stop resource for success. It includes a digital learning hub with step-by-step courses and training on compliance, finance, operations, and sales, masterclasses, which are bi-weekly sessions diving deep into the key areas of trucking and business growth. And there's the Long Haul Podcast. You can hear from industry experts on growing your trucking business. And there's also a partner portal, which lets you connect with vetted industry partners to grow your business effectively. Check it out and see you on the internet.